Hello and welcome to Live Code Happy Hour for this fantastic May 15th, 2020. That little animation makes me so happy and smile. Like I can't start the show out normally with those little happy beer mugs just doing their little dance. They make me happy. Um, Welcome. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We'll just dive right in with the introductions. I start, as usual, with my buddy, Brad.
Hey, everybody. Brad Tilton. I'm a developer advocate with the developer program at ServiceNow. I have been doing all sorts of things on ServiceNow since 2008 and excited to be here and talking components today.
All right. Thank you, Brad. And Jared.
Hey, I'm Jared Munt, platform internals, integration, and security with Finite Partners. I've been around since around the Calgary release. Also on the SNDev Slack, I'm a thread aficionado.
And I'm Andrew Barnes, developer advocate, also at ServiceNow. And this is, I guess I started in Eureka. So if we're using family names, I was Eureka. I'm brand new Eureka instance was how I started. We just concluded. Finish my intro. I gotta stay on. It's been a long couple weeks. I specialize in integrations, managing large scale development teams, and stuff like that. So Brad and I are both on the developer program, which a large part of that is developer.servicenow.com. So we write the blogs there. There's the APIs and your personal developer instances available there. Great resource. Our training team makes some really awesome training module content there. So if you haven't been there before, developer.servicenow.com. Let us introduce our special guests, our drinks. Brad?
I have a three philosophers from I don't even know gang. It is a bourbon barrel aged ale that I'm excited about.
Nice. And Jared?
I'm going with a different sparkling water. Today I have a Spindrift brand pineapple.
Yeah, you had a line on Wednesday. And I went with a Highlands Brewing's Gaelic Ale in Asheville, North Carolina. That's where that brewery is. And I'm looking forward to it. Not nearly as much as Brad is to his.
I am excited about mine.
All right. Well, that's pretty good. So this is, I think, pretty darn sure, at least all the ones I know about. This is the first time we've ever done the show twice in 1 week. So we had a special episode that we had for CreatorCon on Wednesday, where we started building. Our goal was to have a component that rendered some information, and none of the existing components rendered it the way we wanted. So we created an API in our instance to send a component some data, and we built an integration to an exterior third party to get some information with an action in Flow Designer. And so today we're going to complete the other half of that event, which was, so the whole goal was this component. And so we did the infrastructure for the component, the data provider for it from the instance on Wednesday. And today we're going to actually build the component. What else do we want to say about that, Brad? That's
Yeah. I mean, so we could have just consumed the web API from the component, but we wanted to add that abstraction layer and the instance so that we can do some things with the data, and we could even change the source of the data at some point if we feel like we need to without changing the UI layer of the component. So yeah, that's what we did on Wednesday, and hopefully we get some component magic happening today.
Yeah, so that is a good point. So we did do the REST API that our component's going to consume, so that we could switch it out in the future with, the how we retrieve it, how that REST API in ServiceNow gets that data. We can switch out without having to adjust and rebuild our component, which is a good level of abstraction, so that we can just tweak that scripted REST API without having to do anything to our component, as long as the promise between our API and the component stays the same, which is asks the component for the same inputs and returns it the same outputs. Awesome. So if you haven't seen it before, we're going to go into showing how to build the new Orlando-based Now components. Once we start screen sharing, we'll go into those details. There's documentation on the developer site. So one of the things that we did in our big overhaul of the site was bring in the component information to the developer site. So there's a component library there and a whole focused area on components and component building. And with that, I think we're pretty much ready to start the screen share.
All right, well, let me go ahead and share my screen here. I think we want this desktop. Let's see how that looks once we get it into the share.
All right. That's looking okay. Do you want me to zoom in and trim off the right-hand side, or do you want that real estate on the side?
Let's zoom in a little bit.
Okay.
I'll have to trim off the whole side, but zoom in a little bit.
I shall do so while you get rolling.
Okay, so let's start by looking at our scripted REST endpoint that we've created in the instance. So this is the REST API Explorer and an example of how we can consume that endpoint. If you remember from Wednesday's show, we used an external service that may or may not be working today. And we pass it a country for this one, and it gives us some cases back. So if I test this, we're going to get today cases and today tests. This today test is actually some static data I put in there because we're having some issues with the endpoint earlier today. But we're going to get a couple of things back from the scripted REST API. And our goal is to have these numbers show up in our component.
Okay. And so you're in the ServiceNow instance in the REST API Explorer, and you showed how to invoke the API that we're going to consume from our component, which is a really handy tool to preview and see how you should actually call the thing. And so down there, if you scroll down a little bit, we can see how we invoked this. Right there and under that request area, it's just up a little bit. There you go. That might be a little small for everybody, but it's okay. It's a get, and then the API, and then the parameters we're sending, which is country equals world in this case. All right. And so now we're going to switch over to VS Code. And the way you get started with component building is you can follow the the details on developer.servicenow.com or docs site on how to get the tool set installed. And what we have here is we've installed the Now CLI. We also have Node, and some dependencies that have already been installed. And then we ran now CLI project and then the project name, which gives us a framework component, a shell to start from. And if we open up index.js in here, we'll see that I've added just a teeny bit more to that. So basically, I think you're going to need to zoom in, Brad, because that is awful small, even for me.
How is this?
More.
This is more better? Or you want me to
No, I need more. Please make it bigger.
I was joking. Let's get
that might be tolerable, but that's
go.
awful small. I'm sorry. It's just I have bad eyes or something.
Do we want to go back more? All right, I can do that.
Thank you. That's probably good. So I can actually read the things now. So everything inside of that div is what I've added, and pretty much everything not inside of the div there, it came from building the component. So we did do a little bit of work before we started.
Yeah. Sorry, it's good.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's fine. So we stubbed out the using now card. So now card is a component in the library that we're providing. So I had to install that in my project folder. And the way to do that was for Brad, he used npm most likely, and then npm install and the name, which is at ServiceNow/now-card, which you can get the details of that from our component library on developer. And that basically takes us to where this is at right now. So I wanted to catch us up to what we had done offline to get us here. And you want to go ahead and have you already done now develop or now CLI develop so that we could see what this does right now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it here. I did do it to make sure that it works, but let's go ahead and run now CLI develop. And this is going to run our component locally, and we will be able to render it locally before we push it to the instance. And you can see it flashed up there pretty quick, but you can see that it can still connect to the instance. All right, compiled successfully. Where's the...
So when you do that, does it actually save records to the instance?
So not records, but it does save, it saves the scope to the target instance. So if you're logged into an instance and you run develop or deploy or project, any of those will validate that that scope can go into that instance, and then create that scoped record. And then only deploy will actually put records inside that scope.
So Earl says if we do this, it's going to open the browser.
Yes.
Very cool.
Let's have it do that for us.
Next time I'm off the grid, like on a long airplane ride or similar, this would be a great thing to brush up on and play with.
Yep. And you don't need to be online. So there's an offline mode. So you don't have to connect to an instance to do that. But if you are logged into an instance, it will create the scope for you.
And so here it looks like we're on the local Node.js.
We are. And we could probably zoom this in a little bit too, Brad. Thank you, sir.
Right,
so you can see we've got a title for our cards. And then we have two cards, and they contain a title inside of each card and then the data. And this is just static like text I have placed inside of those card details inside of index.js in our component. So this is where we're starting. And now, so this was getting us far enough that, we could see that we're building what we want. And now that we're happy with the design, such as it is, we'll actually wire it together to do what we want it to do, which is get data from the instance. And that's the goal for today, is get data from the instance into those two cards.
Yeah, what we want is we want these two numbers to match these two numbers.
Absolutely.
Without typing it into VS Code.
I mean, we might do a little hand waving.
We'll see.
All
right.
There's that GlideFast party we could go join if we just put the numbers in the hard code them into the component.
Should we look at the developer site to look at the HTTP effect?
Absolutely.
All right, I did that real quick. I went guide, nope. I went reference, now experience UI framework. And we made it here. And now I have this HTTP effect. Is this right? Yeah. I don't think I have installed the HTTP effect, but we can see here in this code snippet what this is going to look like, or what it could look like if we're using the HTTP effect here. So I need to install it first, right?
Yes, absolutely. You do need to install it first.
So let's see if it tells me how to do that somewhere. I think it does tell me to.
It does. If you go to, if you actually go to the, what am I trying to say? Yeah, if you go to the, nope. I'm trying to find the easiest place that has that. And really it's just ServiceNow HTTP effect, I think is, I'm sure it's in there somewhere on how to install that.
Right,
it's under recipe. That's where it is. It's under recipe.
Recipes.
And then the bottom of that.
There we are. Yeah. All right. So this is what we're going to install. Do I have to stop it? Let's just.
You do need to stop your develop version.
All right. So let's install it here. So we are installing the HTTP effect, and then we're going to be able to import it here. So it's installing right now. So let's click back over here. Andrew asked if they have added more docs. No, I'm not logged in, so maybe they have.
There have been some additional docs added to that site over the last 2 months.
As an employee, when I log in, I see different things than somebody who's not authenticated. So I have to check that, but I'm not logged in right now. All right. So I don't need to do this anymore, or I just have to make sure API is added, right? All right, so we have that installed. Let's look at, I can click on this safely, right?
What are you clicking on? Yes,
yeah,
you can click on that.
So we do have the API proxy here. So we've got that, right? And then how do we use it? Well, we have to import the effect into our, in this case, our index.js file. So let's go here, and I'm gonna put it here. So we have our HTTP effect. It's not highlighted because we're not using it yet, which is something I learned live on this show like a month or two ago. So now we have to use the HTTP effect to grab some data. I'm going to
there we go.
Make that smaller. There we go.
Can you do me a favor and go to your JSON, your packages? And look to see what got installed. Okay, HTTP. All right, that's fine. So one thing to note when you're doing this component building, you really want all of your dependency components from ServiceNow to be on the same version. So that's what I was doing there, was checking to make sure that he didn't get one of the early builds for this. I'd already adjusted that, Brad, but you're free to adjust it as well too, sir.
I was told that it was off the screen.
Yeah, I know.
in the
I
YouTube chat.
adjusted it.
Oh, all right.
It's fine. I'll adjust it back.
Man, no, I'll do it. I'll fix it. Keep going.
When you install it from the command line, you didn't give it a version, and so it's going to get whatever version is public right then. But if you specify in these dependencies here an exact version, and then in your project folder, you do if you're using npm, you do an npm space I, and it will get that version and install it for your component. And so the versions are very important.
Yeah, and I actually had to update my Now CLI version today because the last time I had updated it was when I installed it originally in March, I think, and I was a couple of versions off. So just something to remember if something is not working the way you think it should be. Try updating that. All right. So let's hop back over to our index. So our goal is in here, we want to update these with real numbers. So we need to use our HTTP effect.
It's true. So there's a few ways we could do this. How do you want to approach it, Brad?
It's a good question. So I do have some examples open on my other monitors, and they're doing it in different ways.
Because there are different ways to do this. It's true.
I think at some point we are going to have someone on the show to tell us the best way to do some of these things. And there's going to be a really good CreatorCon workshop that Andrew helped write and I have tested that's going to help out with some of that as well.
And that's I'll put it in the description later, but that is CCW 2905. I've also included 3 links handily provided from Jace. You're an MVP, sir, for component now experience stuff that has been broadcasted on demand right now in the Knowledge 20 site. So there's an intro one, there's one about the library, and then there's one about more technical. So there's like 3 tiers levels there, but the workshop's a hands-on workshop. So what are the different ways that you have example wise? So the one that I'm most familiar with is dispatching and consuming that dispatch action and returning data back into through the state process. But you can invoke the APIs like right here in the view.
Yeah, I believe that is the way you are describing is the way that
Brad's
I have
enjoying his beer.
With the custom element for our component. So let's I think
it's your you're driving, you get
down
to pick.
In here, right? Let's do it down in here.
So what are we putting down there? I got distracted.
We are going to add our action handler.
Action handler down here. Awesome.
So let's am I choppy or I just had the audio cut out. Was that me?
I think that was you, but
Okay.
you seem fine from my end.
Well, so let's add the action handlers in here.
Yep.
I think we can do this. So in the action handlers, I'm going to do some copy pasting because that's the best way to do
I'll
it.
allow it.
So component bootstrapped. I am not, this
that's
is
a special one.
Kind of defined. So I learned about some of these properties, I think.
It is absolutely defined. And in fact, in order to use that, you're going to have to add a dependency. So you're going to have to use UI-core, I believe.
Oh, okay. There we go.
So component bootstrap. So you're looking at the documentation for that right now, right? And that is the component is loaded on the page, I believe is what it says.
Yeah. So when I came across this, it made me think of like DOM rendered. So this is the page has loaded and we want to make a call. And this is how I do that. So that's my equivalent to create custom element from ServiceNow core. So I think I add action types here, right?
Yes, action types up there. Right. So you've already had UI core up there. So you're going to need a comma action types. Lovely.
And then we need to add component rendered, not component rendered, but the one we're using to, what are we using?
You're using
bootstrapped.
And copy pasta is so good.
Yes. And now it got brighter because I'm actually using it.
That's, using IDEs is so nice. They're so helpful some days.
Yeah, my text editor won't do that.
Getting them all set up is a pain sometimes, but once you're in the groove and consuming it, it's nice.
All right. I'm going to do a bit of, I think I'm going to do a bit of copy pasting here.
Okay.
Do I need...
So most likely, your component bootstrap is going to be really simple. You're just going to basically take a dispatch, and then you're going to consume a dispatch from your coeffects, and then you're going to dispatch a new action call, right? So you're going to call a different action from your bootstrapping action.
Yeah. So let's go. I'm going to type it because.
Okay.
So dispatch, and then I think we get to pick this action name, right? So
you do, because you're gonna create it right now. So
we're gonna say fetch COVID data.
Very good.
All right, and then let's give it. Let's give it a query.
Yeah. So how generic do you want it to be? Are we actually going to? Yeah. How generic do you want this to be?
Let's make it not generic right now, and then if we have time, we can make it more generic.
Okay. So that if you don't want a generic, then you can just put in what your country : world or US or whatever you were putting in the call, right?
Yeah. Let's do that.
So remind us on the scripted REST API, was that going into a query parameter or into the post body or something?
Query parameter, I believe.
Yes.
Yes. Yep. I see right there towards the bold line towards the top.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Very good.
So the world country, of course.
The world country. The country of world.
All right.
Do we have any authentication or anything on that scripted REST API, or are we going to get it up and running and then think about that?
Because the now CLI is already authenticated to my instance, I don't need to worry about that.
That is slick.
That is handy dandy. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to use, there were like 5 reasons we wanted a scripted REST API for this. And that was one of them, was authentication, no problem.
All right.
Because the security people, when you turn it completely off in dev for a week or whatever the case may be, it does cause some discussion. So this is a great benefit to have that.
So, we're going to get this working. And then, if there's time, we'll abstract out some of these bad things we're doing, like hard coding country world in there right now. But we want to get it working first.
It's kind of offensive to me.
I'm sorry.
Not really.
Would
So
you
we
want
want to, let's go. So what's our API? API COVID endpoint here.
So now we're defining our action that we're calling from the first action. So the bootstrapping action can call multiple actions. We're going to call this particular one that we've created, fetch COVID data. And now we're consuming that create HTTP effect. And we're doing that. And one of the inputs to that is what the API is that you are going to consume here. And now we're putting in the parameters. So we're performing a get, could have been a post, etc. But we're doing a get for ours. And now you're going to do what? Query parameters?
Query params.
Query params with a capital P, I think it is.
There we go. We'll auto complete that.
Sweet.
And that is going to be our country, I think.
Yeah, and that should be
I think this is how it goes.
That feels directionally correct, but it shouldn't be in quotes though, because that is a variable at this point.
All right. And then, so now we need to define what.
And now we define what that does, right? So yeah, and success action type. What, did you pull that over from somewhere?
Ooh, I may have copy pasted that.
You're so fast, sneaky.
Action to be dispatched when the HTTP request has successfully completed. But we have these nice little tooltips here. So what do we do when this is completed? I think we define another action here.
If we want, yes. And that's the general examples that we provide from ServiceNow is we want to componentize these things. So success and failure can be 2 different branches, and those should be different action handlers. So we're gonna call a new action that we're gonna create. Very, very sneaky name of data success.
Yep. I like success.
And Earl pointed out in the chat, one of the really important points for that proxy setup that you showed earlier is we only gave API / and the rest of our endpoint. So we didn't define a complete HTTP header. So that's why that proxy watcher is very important if you're doing something in ServiceNow from a component. So fetch COVID data success is a brand new action. We're creating it right now. And what do we want that thing to do?
I believe
we want it to parse our data, right?
I'm going to copy paste this because I'm not an ES6 guru.
Ooh, I'm not either. So it's time for me to brush up because I learned it, years ago and didn't use it for years because I'm in ServiceNow Developer, and now it's back. So Jared, how's your ES6?
Yeah.
I could probably answer a couple multiple choice questions about it.
Well, that's what we have the chat for,
Yeah.
right?
So
We
when
got the chat.
I mouse over this, it gives me what looks helpful. I think this may be
Function,
some
yeah.
sort of translation.
Yeah.
It's a function.
So arrow is a function definition.
All right. So I know.
So we're defining a function right here.
I know I want to do this and say,
James, you got to come on the show and join us
Yeah.
sometime. We're doing more component stuff next week. Let me know. You can come join us.
So we want to, I think we're assigning result for the action,
Okay.
for the payload of our action.
And
then,
so that's coming from our previous step where we, call the API and then we're getting a payload back. And so that is, that seems reasonable. I'm okay with that.
I think I need to do this,
action
but I'm
isn't
not quite
defined
sure.
right now. So yeah, exactly. So you do need to do this because that's how action. So coeffects was the inputs there, and so action.payload didn't mean anything until you did that.
That makes sense. So do we need that update state? Is that what we're going to use to pass this data to our component?
Yes.
So,
unless we put coeffects into our inputs for our view. So right now, if you scroll up to your view, you'll see that you have update or state and update state. And if we could put coeffects up there, but we typically are using the update state to consume things from our actions this way, at least in all of the stuff I've done.
That makes sense. So generally, I do lots of copy pasting when I'm doing something like this. And then eventually, when I don't copy paste the right things, I figure out why we did certain things. We're not quite there yet in my knowledge of components.
That's okay. We're all learning together. That's part of the show, right?
Yeah.
This is not in case you're just joining us, what we're doing right now is unscripted, unprepared ServiceNow live development. And we are all, expert level ServiceNow developers, but we are novice component developers. This is all new for us.
All right. Do we think we need to do anything else here?
So it depends on how you want to consume the data in your view. So if you want to consume it in a more broken up way, you need to break it up here. So it depends on where you want to do your heavy lifting. Do you want to break up the return data into some nice variables? You should probably do that here in the action versus in the view.
I think we should probably keep the view as simple as possible with our HTML. And
so any of the heavy lifting here you want to do it here. And then, return. The thing we want to consume is two variables that have numbers in them. So let's return two variables with some numbers in them.
All right. I think we need to start with constant.
Okay. What are you going to put in that?
So what I want to put in this is I want to split out. So we know we're getting two things back in our result, I believe. And so,
so result has got two. So result is an object that contains, go to your payload
two properties in it.
Yeah, go to your payload. It contains
today
this.
Cases and today tests.
So let's break those out. Today cases and so
can we do this?
We could be forward polite, but I don't want to be today. I want to get a working thing, and then we'll be better. Is it result dot?
I think that's right, because I got to do some auto completing here.
Okay. So if those are already in there in result that easily, you can actually consume those just that easy.
Yeah.
You can consume those at that level in your view pretty easily. So let's pull those out actually. Since we're not going to do anything manipulation wise to those, I think we're fine there. So now we just need to return result into our update state, right? So we need to put result in our update state in this action. So update state, and then give us a curly braces, and then the only thing in there is going to be a result. And I don't think we need the parentheses. Maybe we do.
Equals?
Let's go look. I've got a thing handy. Action handler.
Update state. I think we may need the parentheses.
Oh yeah, we do need the parentheses. Yay! Good job, Brad. And a semicolon is
that makes sense
on that one, and then looks like I had a. Yeah,
no, I think we're good. Yeah,
that looks directionally correct. So now in the start of our view, before the return, we want to define.
Can we just reference them like here?
You can, but we're not going to. That's to bridge too far for me. Like it's too bad.
Right.
It's too. So up here, let's do const, and then the today's cases and today's tests.
Whoa. Today's
cases.
Wow.
And actually give me no equals and put a curly braces at the start of the const. Yeah. And then give me a comma after today's cases and for today's tests. And then after the curly braces equals state dot and then result. And then, yeah. So that should give us two variables, today's cases and today's tests, that are essentially state dot result dot today's cases, the value of that.
And do they need to be in that curly brace? We have a question from Pablo in the chat regarding const curly brackets.
Yes, I'm not like a ES6 wizard, but that's how I've seen those done. It's a shorthand way to get, so I don't have to do individual declarations. So I don't have to do today's cases equals state dot result dot today's cases. If I do it this way, it'll go, and if there's a exactly same named variable inside of result, it will get me the value of that.
That makes sense. I assumed it was a ES6 thing, since it's not in any existing business rules and things on the platform.
And, you know, an ES6 wizard out there can absolutely correct me, because, you know, this is, but that's how I understand it to work. And now we can consume today's cases.
So how do we consume that here? Do I need to wrap cases. It or no? It's already okay.
It should be ready to take it right immediately.
Yeah. All right. Today's cases, today's tests.
And, you know, let's run this. See how bad we did.
Right. Votes in the YouTube chat. Who thinks this is going to work?
Ooh, man, that's rough. Uh,
I'm gonna give it some time. Let's see who thinks this is gonna work. Do I? I don't have the terminal in there. No.
Things working on the show on the first time, or you definitely want to bet against that, just as a general rule.
But I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm gonna give it a thumbs up.
All right. I think it's gonna. Oh, and we want it to.
I mean, you've already got the browser open, but
I know. I want it to open for me though.
All right, go ahead, do it.
All right.
Dorian's got his drink ready. What are you drinking today, Dorian? High quality H2O, some tea, some Earl Grey, beer. What you got?
Leftover core dump from Wednesday.
Leftover core dump from Wednesday.
Leftover core dump.
Because that's what you do with gin, is you just leave it around until you have nothing else.
I used the rest of my good gin on that core dump. Oh.
Ooh, country is not defined. All right.
This did not
the query
work.
params.
So this is a very nice detailed error message.
That is a very nice. So maybe when
I
when you
think it
put
needs
quotes
to be
on
in
it,
quotes.
yeah, maybe when you put quotes on it, you were right and I was wrong. I've been wrong before.
All right, this was it. So I put quotes on it. We're saving. Compiled success. Oh. So
I mean,
that
it
was
compiled.
Right, but that was not the reason that it didn't work. Okay.
It compiled.
Should we see if there are any?
Yeah, let's see. Reload it and see if you get. Go ahead and clear that, and then reload it, and then see if it connects to the instance at all. I can't read any of that, so you're gonna have to scroll up and try and read that stuff.
So we have an error. I actually got that error earlier and can't read today's. You know what? Today's cases is not a thing. So we never, where did I type today's cases?
Oh, yeah. I define those as being in results.
Today cases and today tests.
Yeah, so this is from your API.
Yes. Yeah.
And I gave you how I would have named them.
And Andrew in the chat got it.
Oh, hey.
Oh,
those are the numbers from our instance, guys. Let's just pretend like that red stuff didn't show up down there.
Well, that's a drink
like
right
it works
there.
To me.
That's some victory right there. I approve of this action.
So the real test is going back into the component and walking through it and figuring out why the things that we typed resulted in what they resulted in.
Pack it up, y'all. We got a success. That's right, Earl. Let's dive into the component and show some detail on what we did and why it worked. So we started from a stubbed out component, which you can get from the YouTube description. So if you go to the GitHub link there, that'll take you to our repo. And under that will be the component that we built today. The stub that Brad started from is there. That's how he installed it on his machine right before the show. The first thing that we did was we installed HTTP effect and did all the other now CLI like precursor steps of getting now CLI and node and that sort of stuff. But once you have the component loaded and can do now CLI develop and render something from the stub, we walked through the rest of this today, which was what are some of the interesting things here. So we are consuming create effect up there. So we added that. But the other things that we're consuming and we added action type on line 1 so that we could use component bootstrap, which is defined by ServiceNow when the component loads. And you can get that from the developer site documentation.
Yeah, let's look at that
there's several other ones there that are very useful in the life cycle handlers.
Yeah, I thought this is something that when I was originally reading the documentation, just kind of glazed over because there's so much info in here, and I couldn't really connect it to anything real at the time. But when I saw this used and then came back and looked at it, it was pretty interesting to have, there's some events that get dispatched at different points when my components are getting loaded and rendered and changed, that are pretty nice to come in here and use and use as a trigger to do something in your component.
Right. Yep. And so we use the bootstrap one, which is the loading one. And you could use other ones like an error thrown or a property changed. It's a very, very handy one. So properties and components are super important because you need to do things as a result of properties changing typically. And then back in our component, we are consuming that bootstrap process and dispatching our own event, fetch COVID data, and we're sending it some properties. And then we're consuming that in fetch COVID data action handler that we created, which is using create HTTP effect, which is, calling an outbound REST message. And then if you get a successful response, you have success action type that we define. There's also a failure action type. I'm not sure that failure is the right word, but there's definitely another one that is already predefined that you use there.
Oh, I was going to try to find it.
Yeah. It's on that page, but
scroll enough.
So we only care about success today. So we dispatched a new action, data success. And in that, basically, we just took our payload. What you would typically do here after outbound REST is parse your response and manipulate the data and make it ready to be consumed by the rest of your component, right? In this case, since we were the API provider from the scripted REST API that we built it so that it would be very simple to consume. And so we didn't have to do very much to consume that because we built it. Well, many times you're not the provider of your API, and therefore, you need to do way more parsing and manipulation of that response data to get it into some usable form for your component to consume. Ours was really simple. So we said update our state with result in it. And then if we go up to the view, we're wrapping up here. Just a teeny bit, the teeniest bit more. There. Oh, nope. You had the whole thing. I'm sorry. So in our view, we're saying, hey, we're going to establish these two new variables, today's case tests, and they're coming from state.result and then our variable names. And then we consume those in our now cards, which those are ServiceNow provided library components. It could have been one of your own components that you've built or partners, etc. That dependency was established at the top. So Brad is showing you if you go to reference, and then at the top right of reference is the component library. And there's some really useful information about each of these ones that ServiceNow is providing. So there's the API reference. There's its properties and actions that are already defined for it. And the usage is really useful page for me, at least. Like this usage page is so handy. because it tells you, one, the breakdown of the parts of the component, and there's helpful suggestions on um, when and how you should use this particular component.
Yeah, the component library page is really nice, and obviously this will be updated, as we go through new releases and there's more components available. Right now, these are all the components that are available in the Orlando release.
And so in the Paris release, in Q3, there will be more components released here. So I think we're good on the screen share. We achieved our objective. Victory was had.
Right.
Love it.
So we built our component. We are consuming an API. It's from our ServiceNow instance that we wrote ourselves last time, a scripted REST API that we created to consume a third-party API. But we abstracted our component away from that third-party API into something we could control outside of that component building. Because once I deploy this component to my instance, which we didn't do, but it's very simple to do, which was now CLI deploy. And then that will package up. So it'll do that same process as develop did. It will do the build process for your component, mimify it, and send it up to your ServiceNow instance into the scope that you have established for that component. And only one component can go into a scope.
Yes.
And our future selves will thank us for adding in that layer of abstraction.
Yes, they will.
That's right. One thing I wanted to say is, it can be, we're right at the beginning of component development still. And I know for me, as I have a couple of little projects that I'm trying to do with components, and it's sometimes frustrating that there's not enough examples out there. I think we're pretty close to having some more examples out there. If you have components that you built and you want to share, let us know that in the chat, and we
not in the chat,
would love to look at those.
But in the comments of the YouTube.
In the comments.
Or over on the developer site in the blog, one of our component blogs, add a comment there.
Yeah.
And then we'll link to that. And if you have a really good example and you want us to host that repo, in the repo that's linked in the description below, use one of those methods to reach us, and we can do so. So let's rate our special guest hosts, starting with Brad.
Yeah, so I had this Three Philosophers bourbon barrel ale, which was nice. I normally have a lot of bourbon barrel stouts in the winter, but we're kind of leaving the winter. It was really good. I would say it was a 4.25. I'd give it a bump because we were successful.
A success bomb. And Jared, you got some delicious
real fruit sparkling water, 14 calories in this can. Ooh. And I'm gonna give it a 4.0 again.
Nice. And my Highland Brewing Gaelic Ale is quite good. It's quite tasty. Probably a 4. It doesn't get a success bump because I had faith in Brad. I had all the faith, and but it was very tasty. So I hope you enjoyed CreatorCon week. If you participated with us this week for CreatorCon stuff, if you didn't, if you're watching this later and you haven't done anything for CreatorCon, go to knowledge.servicenow.com. There's on-demand content there, more than 100. I think it's 200 things now. Next week is Now on Now. Is the focus for Now on Now, and I believe that is in the schedule for next week. Obviously, if you're watching this too much later, that will change, but for right now, next week is Now on Now, which is ServiceNow talking about how we at ServiceNow consume and use ServiceNow to make our lives as ServiceNow employees better. So we say that we make the world work better. I'm not so good at slogans. And so this is our chance to highlight how we make employees' lives better with ServiceNow internally. And I know I've experienced some pretty delightful parts of consuming services internal at ServiceNow through ServiceNow interfaces. So there's been some great times for me for those things. Anything else that you find folks want to share before we leave? Nope. Jared?
Is there going to be a part 3 on this? Are we going to add some caching or any fun stuff anywhere in the line?
I think part 3 next week, if we can get it. So the workshop owner might join us next week. And if he does, we'll do part 3 components, and he'll walk us through any of the parts that we could have done in a more best practices, standard practices sort of way, and give us some flavor and detail that, we just don't have the expertise to share yet. I mean, we're working on it, but we're not component experts. So if we get a component expert next week, we'll do a part 3. And otherwise we'll hold off on a part 3 for this until we get someone more expert to take this to the next level.
Sounds great.
So with that, thank you for joining us, everyone out in the chat. If you're watching this later, thank you for participating. Put those YouTube comments in. We actually do read them and respond to them. So go ahead and reply there, and see us anytime at developer.servicenow.com. Have a great weekend. Thanks, everybody.